Yeah.
So it would be I would prefer to have this chat in person, sitting in a pub somewhere in whatever, like somewhere in Midlands, or whatever, and just chats, But obviously, that's not going to happen for a few months. So, anyway, let's get into it. Welcome to the episode 34 of Take It Easy, 3-4. Our today's guest is Maz Shar. He's known as Epic Winning Maz on Twitter, and amongst other things, he's known for bringing us the UK's EV registration statistics every month. Also, any new charges and statistics about that sort of data analysis. He's a very popular source of that data on Twitter. If you're not following him, you're missing out. Go and follow him. Give him a buzz. The doodads are in the description. As the cool kids say these days, smash that like button. Subscribe everyone in your family. If you're listening to this on anything, give us a review. Go to iTunes, give us a 5-star review. If you're listening on any other network, just don't hesitate to give me the highest review you can. Just share, subscribe, shower me with smiley faces on the on Twitters, and without further ado, here's Maz.
Never mind that now. Never mind.
Why, that's me. Look at me. I'm an old man.
I'm Dr. Emmett Brown. I'm standing here on the parking lot at
Thank God I've still got my hair.
October 20. But I need a nuclear reaction to generate the 1.21 gigawatts of electricity.
1.21 gigawatts. 1.21 gigawatts.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Maz Shar. I'm known as Epic Winning Maz on Twitter. So a bit about me. I was born in Pakistan about quite some time ago. Moved here when I was very young, a little baby. I studied computer science at uni, went on to be a software engineer, and really fell into EVs when I was learning to drive. I was looking for, what my first car could be. And I really wanted it to be an electric car. And just, I was looking at hybrid EVs because I thought, I'm assuming hybrid EVs will be cheaper, but I was in for a surprise. So this was back in 2017. A lot of hybrids were like eight grand, 10 grand. And then, a couple of days later, I looked at EVs again, just for fun. And then I saw the Renault Zoe and I was like, wow, this is only 5,000. And then I learned about the battery lease and I learned about, all the different electric car terms. And I just became fascinated in this new kind of technology. And I started seeing them everywhere. Started looking into other cars that are coming out or were already out, like the Nissan Leaf. And kind of started spotting chargers on routes as well. So I ended up getting a petrol car in the end because my budget was £2,000, so I couldn't afford anything else. And I drove that for a year. It was a 10-year-old Hyundai i30 manual. And back in 2019, I came across some good leasing deals for an electric car. And I ended up getting the Ioniq in December 2019. And since then, I've been driving pure EVs, driven a number of them. We've done, I think, in total about 27,000 miles without any home charging. And definitely won't be going back. But so EVs kind of take up a lot of who I am and what I do. But besides that, I've always kind of been interested in technology, particularly, that kind of disruptive technology. So things like robotics, artificial intelligence, augmented reality, virtual reality, that kind of stuff. And it's just fascinating because you have all these different voices and different people, people in business, people in like government and policy, and people, the actual engineers that work on it, and then the users. And I just really enjoy like taking in all those perspectives and kind of thinking about what the future might look like based on everyone's opinions. So, yeah, it's just fun to be curious about all this stuff.
Oh yeah. It's always very fun to be curious, and you're selling yourself a little bit short in there because you're pretty active on Twitter and well known as in the sort of EV environments or EV community, I suppose we can call ourselves that. And you've been very active, sort of helping out people, with the charging network and its expansion improvements. I think you're almost an unofficial employee of GridServe at this point. At least they certainly should have you on the payroll.
And I like to think of myself as impartial. Well, I try to be, but yes, I do. I'm always there with GridServe stuff. So,
you've mentioned the the fascination with the new technologies, and obviously you're a young fella, much younger than me. So you're looking at things from a slightly different perspective, which I appreciate. There's a lot of, when I look at people like yourself, there's a lot of exciting things happening. It's not all doom and glooms, which is good. This is what we want. And you've mentioned the AI and robotics, and what do you think? Because you have some background in those sort of things. You know a lot about those things, right? What do you think? Yeah. What do you think AI has to offer in the future?
Oh, that's a big question.
Or actually, let's start with the sort of the basics of AI, because I think it's a term that gets thrown around quite a lot. Like when I was speaking of being old, when I was younger, it was statistical analysis was one of the things. There was a fuzzy logic was another one. Artificial neural networks was another one. Then I can't remember what was the next term, but AI is now kind of encompassing loads of things. The ones that I've mentioned and probably more.
Yeah.
So if you had to explain to somebody what AI is in like 5 minutes, what would be your take on it?
So I would kind of say, AI has been around for a number of years, so it's always been wrapped up in another set of buzzwords or something like that. But the idea is, with software, we've come a long way by having these intelligent devices, or kind of intelligent devices, that can automate a lot of what we would do manually normally. And to me, AI is kind of an evolution of that, where it becomes an agent within an environment that has access to more information about the environment and doesn't need to be told or prescribed what needs to be done. So there's no one with a set of instructions, like, saying in the case of robotics, lift your fifth joint by this much and rotate it by this much at this speed, which is what a lot of software tends to be, is a lot of if statements going through all these different possibilities and conditions. So I'll first, caution this with the fact that in terms of my credentials, I'm currently studying AI at King's College London, and so I'm starting on this journey. But I have been reading up on this about AI as a concept, and there's AI as a concept, and then there's implementations of AI in a practical sense, and what's actually possible now, and what could be possible in the future. And generally, I like to think of it as, these different evolutions of automated technology. So if we take a car as an example, cruise control has been around for a long time. And you can think of cruise control as just, a simple thing that says, give me a target speed. I'm going to push on the accelerator or, move the car until I reach that speed, irrespective of anything that's happening around me. That's kind of how basic cruise control operates. And then you kind of say, okay, that's kind of pretty much software. There's a condition, and it's making a change until that condition is met. But the condition is very much, given by the user or the human being. And then you get stuff like adaptive cruise control, which is a bit smarter, a bit more intelligent, which then takes your target, speed, and then says, okay, what's around me? I can see that there's some object ahead of me traveling at this kind of speed. And therefore, in order to maintain a certain distance for safety or for other reasons, this agent or the system has to manage all those different priorities, inputs, to determine what the best output is. And that kind of comes into the realm of AI, which is this system that is taking in all these different parameters and then trying to achieve a certain outcome. And then you get like a subset of AI, which is machine learning, which is rooted in like statistical analysis, looking at previous data and all sorts of data and trying to determine what are the patterns, recognizing the patterns, and what's the best outcome out of that. And really, it's more about how can we approximate the best decision or best outcome, given that as human beings, yes, we know how to do a lot of things fairly well, and such as driving a car, but the way we know that isn't exactly something that we can teach or instill into a computer. We can't write a set of instructions, as I said before, exactly what is around me and how to differentiate between the barrier of the motorway and a pedestrian, or a traffic light and a traffic cone, or a car and a motorbike or a cycle. We can't, say exactly how our eyes, perceive that. We don't even fully understand it ourselves. So that's when there is this kind of data-centric approach of looking at lots of different examples and trying to label them, and then getting the computer to find the pathway to that conclusion, if that makes sense. So that's kind of where I see, what's kind of things are evolving into. So with Tesla's kind of autopilot approach, which you can see in the visualization. So whereas we had a cruise control, you tell it a target speed and it just, goes for that speed, not caring what's in front of you or whatever. Then you have adaptive cruise control, which is kind of saying, there's something in front of us, so we need to keep a distance. Now, Tesla's autopilot is now looking at identifying exactly what's there through lots of examples of that particular object, and then visualizing that or acting appropriately. And that's kind of where the machine learning comes in, taking in lots of data, processing it, and trying to understand the environment better. And I think that's the overall goal for that kind of the AI.
Yeah. You've mentioned the robotics and manufacturing as well. That's this is like the field that I don't have much knowledge about, how they manufacture cars, obviously, but there's been a lot of chat about improving the manufacturing process using AI, and I have no idea how that's how that applies. But suffice to say, so basically, if I had to summarize what you said, we used to have computers that would just humans would program them using certain conditions, using an algorithm, if this and that sort of logic. But now we can take even more inputs and produce a bit more. The word that I love is fuzzy sort of output, which is you don't just say 1 or 0, you say anything between 1 and 0. There's probability of certain outcomes, and then you make further decisions based on that, and that allows you to have a bit more intelligence. I think I'm not a big fan of people abusing the word smart or intelligent when it comes to computers and machines, because at the end of the day, they're very dumb.
They are, yes. And the term smart especially gets put into anything that has some kind of Bluetooth connectivity or something, which is not true.
It works with Alexa or or Google Home or whatever.
Which can be smart. It can have smart things, but it's not, you still have to tell it what to do, and
So do you think there's going to be more AI technologies pushed into our sort of day-to-day products, not just cars, but like simple things? I mean, I know for a fact that there's a lot of it happening. Like I use Apple products quite a lot because I used to be an Apple engineer, and or working on Apple technologies are not for Apple themselves. I should make it clear. But I know that there's loads of things happening under the covers that you don't even know about, like the suggestions that you sometimes get from your phone or from a dictionary, even, like, are based on your previous behavior and other things in the system. And this is like under the covers, not kind of in your face. This is intelligence, whatever. But is there anything else, do you think, that you're aware of that is going to improve with AI in the future?
Yeah, so I think a lot of things slowly are becoming kind of improving. So I know a lot of the things, are these recommendation systems that look at what you've done previously and then recommend things or give you definitions or help you with your search results. And they can be good and bad. Part of the problem I kind of see with those is they reaffirm some of your beliefs, or they take you down a rabbit hole where if you like one particular kind of political party or one particular type of opinion, you'll be recommended videos or stuff like that with sharing the same kind of opinions. So there's those disadvantages as well. But we are seeing, because we do see a lot of other benefits. So like, speech recognition has come a long way. I remember when I used to use Google Assistant maybe, 10, 15 years ago, and not 15 years ago, but like, let's say 10 years ago. And it was very much, you had to speak very clearly, especially with someone who had an accent. You had to speak very clearly, speak very slowly for it to understand. Whereas now you can pretty much say it at your normal pace, and it gets what it at least captures the audio and makes some sense of the structure of the sentence that you're speaking. There's still a lot of fine tuning left, and I think that's a real big improvement. The other one is computer vision. So for the last 10 years, there's been quite a lot of improvement in being able to understand and detect different objects in the physical world. And personally, that's the kind of stuff that I find most fascinating, is having these devices that can support you in your day-to-day activities and that interact with the physical world. So nowadays the cameras on our phones are becoming a lot more smarter, and currently a lot of that technology is being used in computational photography. So making your pictures a bit more nice, dealing with low light situations, or even letting you remove certain objects out of the photo. But what I see in the future is, as the sensors get more complicated, particularly when they start adding a few more 3D sensors, there's an opportunity for you to, use that as a device that can help you figure things out, figure where you are, where you need to go, but also identify different objects around you. And yeah, there's lots of different scenarios where having a device that can understand the world better, it can be beneficial. Then I like the other part of it that I'm interested in is objects that can physically, work within the environment. So the one that comes to mind is robots. And right now, our idea of functional robots is vacuum cleaners. So those robot vacuum cleaners that kind of go around in homes, and they are, they're pretty primitive, but they're a good indication of what can come in the future. And the way I kind of see it is that we're kind of solving problems at different dimensions. So right now it's very much at a floor level, 2D, going up and down or left and right. And then we're going to have to, what we're starting to see is kind of a bit more clever navigation within that environment. So there's some companies that can do object detection, so it can detect if this is a cable and then I need to avoid it. This is a chair leg. And then if you extrapolate a bit further, maybe we can have objects that can work in the 3D dimension. So maybe it'll have a manipulator, an arm of some sort. So I think, all of this stuff is stuff as consumers we interact with directly, but there are other things like around us that we're not aware of. For example, factories are a big one where they allow for a lot of processes to be optimized within constrained environments. So that's the kind of the big thing, is that there's AI with unconstrained environments, which is can be considered to be quite primitive. So like the robot vacuum cleaners, your smart speakers, and all of that. But then there's AI in constrained environments that have maybe better capability. So the robots in factories, or if you see like what Waymo and have done in California, where they have fully self-driving cars, but in geofence locations. So it's just about, I think the biggest challenge is scaling it up and how you deal with the infinitely complicated world that we somehow managed to traverse.
Yeah, well, people sometimes have trouble navigating the real world, or they're scared of it. So, if you think about a robot trying to navigate that, with much more primitive physical controls or physical set of movements and abilities, a robot it's not going to get an idea all of a sudden to do something funky in the middle of the road. It's not going to like hear a nice song on his phone and start dancing. This is where I would. Once a robot starts doing that just on its own without being programmed to do so, I'll be like, this is an intelligent machine.
Okay, so that's your bar for intelligence.
Yeah. Once they start creative, I'll be like, yeah, this is intelligence. There's intelligence in there.
What if they create something creative by chance? Let's say it evokes emotions in you, but it's just putting what if the process isn't creative, but the output is? Is it intelligent? Is it creative in your
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't think that's creative. That wouldn't be creative. That would be just pure accident. I think that this is where like when you have an old piece of junk equipment of some sort, or a car that just misbehaves and people say it has a soul. I think that's the accidental creativity. When it's spills oil in the middle of the road all of a sudden, or it stops working. I don't think that's creativity. Yeah, I think I don't know what the actual Wikipedia sort of or encyclopedian term for the dictionary term for intelligence is, but I presume it's like being self-aware, right? So knowing that you are there, and having sort of internal voices and multiple kind of ability to have an inner voice almost, and talk to yourself and reason with yourself and an external world. But I think creativity is one of the outputs of that. So that's why I'm mentioning sort of dancing in the middle of the road as a sort of example.
Yeah,
not just because one of the cogs got a leaf in it and the robot's just spinning randomly all of a sudden.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think. So I think this is a completely made-up term, artificial intelligence. It's not, and it's not made by. I don't think that it's certainly not used by philosophers who actually appreciate and understand the meaning or discuss and debate the meaning of intelligence and consciousness. And I prefer not to go into those debates. And I think that I think we definitely need to tone down our expectations, or the public need to tone down their expectations of what AI or what robots are, and they're not going to be our friends, at least not in the human sense or the way that we're used to. But I do think that they will have utility and value of some sort. Yeah. But and I think, and I'm going to say this, and some people might not like this, and I do think that this is so. Tesla announced the Tesla bot, and I did think that was quite problematic because it again raises expectations of what's actually possible and what's practical and what's actually useful, and especially because it's being announced by a company like Tesla, who are in the AI space. I think that it can,
or Elon Musk, who's. I think it's one of Elon Musk. If there's one thing that he's cracked, is the ability to overpromise and excite people, and then just deliver about 20% of it, and still make everyone happy.
Yeah, and I think some people would say that's actually okay, because if it's a means to the end, then maybe it's okay to oversell. I just think with robotics in particular, it's a real big gap. But
I mean, they didn't even have a real robot on stage. It was just a human dressed in a thing. I think it was just like the low point of Elon Musk's presentation, personally.
Yeah,
I couldn't believe it. I was like, "This is no, seriously, mate. This isn't." I was expecting him to just be like, lift out the mask of the thing, and we would see an actual robot inside, and and then he would say, "Well, yeah, all the computers, that actually control him are behind, but we're going to do everything in this sort of thing." Yeah,
okay.
just
like a puppet. Almost.
Yeah. But yeah, I think what we ended up seeing, I think I was just like, no, this is just the lowest you could have done. But I, as much as I'm excited about everything he's talking about, I've learned over the years to expect less and less out of him in practice, and maybe that kind of made me a cynical person as I am when it comes to Elon Musk. But
I should say that my actual introduction to EVs was Tesla and Elon Musk. So I am a big Elon Musk fan. I followed them through SpaceX and then into like Tesla stuff. And I do, I appreciate him, and I think this is where I'm growing older and realizing that as I was really excited about, all the things that Elon Musk mentioned, I kind of, I'm a bit more cynical as well myself about, the actual end result. But yeah, whatever. There are people like this in our lives, and we come across.
I mean, I've worked for so many different businesses because I used to be a contractor pretty much most of my life, and when you're contracting, when you're you end up, at least in my positions, I used to talk to loads of CEOs directly or VPs of different kind, and they're all kind of like that, but they don't have the big media microphone. They say things like that. They're very excited about things, and that's their job, is to excite everybody and lead. But they don't say that to everybody around them, because people, when you're a bit more serious about your business, that people will hold you to that, and you'll be accountable for everything you say. Whereas for some reason Elon Musk just gets away with it, whether it's his personality trait or he's just I mean, he's done plenty to sort of accelerate the electrification of the auto industry, and there's no denying that EVs are the future and people actually want to buy them, because you just look at the sales figures and the supply and the demand. There's just way more supply. Oh, sorry, there's way more demand than supply, even now, and even for Tesla. Mm-hmm. So it's just we cannot deny that. But at the same time, he talks a lot of out of his backside.
Yes,
it's just it's just a fact. Like by now, if I was to believe whatever he said, that we would have robo taxis driving us in Model 3 everywhere. I think that's the future we were promised by 2018, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it was something like that. But I will say that they've done a lot of good things, as like even if they haven't achieved the end goal, the progress with autopilot has been really interesting and I think positive. So they're taking a different approach in terms of self-driving cars as some of the others, as it's been well documented. But irrespective of what ends up happening, the team that they have behind them, because I listened to AI Day, and I've listened to the like previous talks from Tesla and Tesla's AI team, and the way that they've architected their AI system, the way that they're scaling up their approach with data. They have targeted neural networks for specific objects and specific sensors, and they're able to deal with contention with different sensors. So if the radar is saying one thing and the vision system saying another, which do you trust and how do you handle that? And the way that they're able to debug and diagnose some of those problems, like, it gave me a lot of confidence in them having the capability to get, to make big progress in not AI, not just AI in general, but self-driving cars as well. I think that's a great thing. Like, at least there is, it's not just snake oil behind the salesperson. There is some good remedies as well. So.
Oh yeah, I agree. It's because you've mentioned Waymo and some other companies like that. What nobody thinks about is the sheer amount of computing power that these cars have to have because they have way too many sensors. Like it's a sensory overload. You've got lidars, cameras, radars. I don't know what else is in there, and they obviously, and like you said, they have very well mapped environment, so they know to the inch or centimeter, where the curb is, which way the lane goes. Whereas the Tesla has none of that. It's still, there's still way to go. Like you wouldn't be able to let it drive around the Arc de Triomphe in Paris on its own. It would just bash into something, or it will get rammed by somebody else. Because it's just not trained in that environment. Although I'm sure somebody's been driving Tesla Model 3 around that quite a lot, and I'm sure they have that data. It'll be funny actually to see how.
It's a chaotic.
Yeah, but if you imagine the sort of the curve. I'm talking to the listener because I'm sure you're aware of it. But the more sensors you have, the more data you have. So if you imagine a large sort of wide stream of data, the more processing power you need to gain the same outcome. Which in the case of a car is just steering the wheel and then controlling the speed. Those are the sort of the two variables you have. So the output is pretty small, pretty simple. But you get a whole slew of things you can input into it, and that requires a lot of energy. So the more input you have, the more processing you need, the more energy you're going to need. And whenever you see those cars that they show in like demos or whatever, one thing that they don't show is what's hidden in the trunk of the car, which is usually 10 or 20 computers that have their own dedicated battery basically to keep it running. Because it takes a couple of kilowatts usually to keep it all running. So I'm at an awe that they were able to create an architecture that doesn't require any of that. I mean, it still requires a lot of power. Don't get me wrong, but it's nothing compared to what the other startups had. So that in computer science, as you know very well, and again, I'm just talking to the sort of the listeners, is architecture and kind of designing the architecture, solving architectural problems is like the basic foundation of a good product or good design is just having the sort of the architectural patterns. If you over engineer something from that sort of ground, or from that perspective, it's just not gonna. It's going to cause problems in the future. It's never going to fulfill the goal that it has.
You're exactly right. And it's as you scale, the problems start to multiply. So that's another great thing about Tesla is the amount of cars that they have testing this stuff is a great advantage, and does mean that they're able to do so many great things with just limited sensors because of the vast amount of data that they collect. I personally would like, again, I'm not an expert or anything like this, but I know that people often say, LiDAR or cameras, which one should it be? But what I would personally like to see is, it's great that they are developing with just cameras, because it means that they can really strengthen that vision system. But I still would like to see in the future, as a redundancy, to have a LiDAR system once they become cheap enough to put into production vehicles. And I think that is maybe what Tesla will do in the future. But yeah, or maybe they won't need it, but it's just as a redundancy, you always want more safety tech.
Yeah. I was kind of worried that when they said that they're going to phase out the radar in front of the car, because if there's one thing we know about in the environment is that it doesn't, your vision sometimes fails you. It gets dark, or it just rains, or there's a fog, and you just need that extra data. Mm-hmm. And also, what radar allows them to do is to have visibility over an object that is that is behind the object in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
If there's a lorry in front of you and another car in front of that lorry, you won't be able to see what's going on there, whereas the radar has proven quite useful in that. So I don't know, but at the same time they have to be practical about it. So I think there's going to be still. I am a bit cynical about the sort of the self-driving, the full self-driving thing. But before I give you my own thoughts, like, what do you think? Will we see in your or my lifetime a self-driving cars that are just norm?
So, funny story. So, when I was younger, like maybe like 12 or something like that, I remember watching a documentary about self-driving cars. And I remember, so back then, that's when I think cruise control started becoming popular, or some form of it. And there was, this documentary, and it started up, it's talked about all the different sensors and what goes into making a car self-driving or being able to drive itself. And I remember they had like B clips of cars on highways, but the highways were like completely empty, so it was just the self-driving cars on their own. And I remember at the end they were just like, "Yeah, this is all. It's a nice vision of the future, but it's far too complicated for it to work." But the reason why I mention that is because still, 15 years later or whatever, it's still a vision. So that kind of makes me a bit more cynical, and like, we can get really excited about technologies, and we can paint a pretty picture, but there's still a lot of pieces that need to fall into place for it to come to fruition. And there are far smarter people that are kind of working in those areas and trying to solve those problems. And I don't think it needs to be binary, like will there be or won't there be. I personally think there will be. That's just my guess, really, my guesstimate, that in my lifetime I'd hope to think that it's a solvable problem. I certainly think that there will be to some extent, and I think that's what I'm always kind of thinking about from a utility perspective. We will get cars that will have more assisted systems, and yeah, eventually we will get self-driving cars. I think how that plays out, what path that is, I'm not sure.
Okay. I mean, we already have loads of self-driving sort of pods and stuff available. You can go and, there's multiple companies making them, but what they all rely on is a private sort of environment that they don't have to interact with other cars. They can mingle with, other pods of the same type or pedestrians, but they can't really mingle very well with just cars. So do you think that will require? And obviously, there's things like DLR in London, that is self-driving system. But again, it's a train on the tracks. So there's some parts of the tube, I think, that are self-driving as well.
Okay.
But do you think we will see those self-driving cars kind of with regular cars, quote unquote, on the road, human driven cars, or do you think it will be separate roads just for self-driving cars? How do you think that's going to pan out? Which way do you think it should go?
I think to scale, I think that it needs to be the two together. I don't think we can start building separate roads for autonomous pods. Maybe we decommission some roads and ban human-driven cars. I think there will be a period where, assuming self-driving cars happen, and this is me saying that they're on public roads, essentially doing the same trips that someone driving the car would be doing. I think there will be a period where there might be some problems with the two working together, but I think that it will economically become more sensible to just have all of them be self-driving. And I think that will drive most people's decisions to just not drive themselves for most of the time, such that it won't be a problem. of having the two mixed together. I'm sure there are some solutions that, they talk about vehicle to vehicle communication, and the idea that even if a human's driving, there will be enough communication between cars that can, provide the self-driving cars with enough information to deal with any conflicts. But the other point I wanted to say, like, whatever happens, like, I think the reason why I say the two have to mix together, because to really get the benefits of self-driving cars, I think that you can't have like a halfway in between, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I think people will be demanding, self-driving cars once they experience it. And I try and think of this as like, in 1,000 years' time, what technology will people remember? Because they're not going to remember. I'm trying to think. They're not going to remember. They're not going to remember the iPhone. Maybe Apple will still be around or whatever, but they're not going to remember iPhone specifically. And although it plays a big part in our life at the moment, the fundamentally, like, what it brought to us versus a normal mobile phone isn't that much different. It allows us to connect and communicate in more rich ways, but fundamentally being able to speak to people around the world, it's still the same thing. Same with the switch between petrol and electric cars. I don't think that 1,000 years from now they'll remember the specific engines driving the cars. I think they'll remember this kind of whole green era or whatever. But self-driving cars, I do think that that's a technology that can fundamentally shift a lot of things around us. How we get deliveries, what we do inside cars, where we sleep. There's ideas that you could have a hotel room that then turns into a car or vice versa, and like this idea of like autonomous moving platforms can lead to. Same with virtual reality. I think that would be another thing. This idea of spending more time and having more different types of experiences in the digital world would be something that's going to be remembered in 1,000 years. So I want to ask you, what do you think we'll remember in 1,000 years?
Wow, it's very hard to answer that question because if you think about it, what do we remember from 1,000 years ago? We don't remember. There's a lot of technology that we just don't remember anymore because it was needed to solve problems that existed at the time that we no longer have. Right? We now have completely different types of clothes and buildings that we live in. There were loads of jobs that required at the time and technologies that aided those jobs that we would just look at now and be like, this is just primitive and completely unnecessary.
Yeah.
But I think I don't know. I personally, when it comes to self-driving cars, I'm going to be very cynical about it because I think the problem is too hard to be solved at the moment, and we just need to simplify it. And mixing cars on the road is, like if we today decided as a sort of, say in the UK, we would wake up and be like, in a month we're going to ban all cars driven by humans. From now on, it's just self-driving cars. It would be possible if we all had access to the car that could test drive it as well as sort of the latest sort of Tesla, and that tech was available everywhere. I mean, this is going to be sort of not funny joke, but if you could just buy it for a $5 from China and stick it in your car, it would be possible. And this is the sort of the level of I can't find the word, but it would have to be everywhere, and it would have to be available fairly cost efficiently for it to be viable. And there's companies now that can do that. Apart from Tesla, there's companies like Coma AI that I've seen recently. Their interview on the Transport Evolved, which was interesting. Which is another channel that everyone should actually go and subscribe and watch because they have some good content in there. So I don't think it's just up to Musk to lead us that way. I think
Definitely, yeah.
self-driving cars are much simpler than we think, but we just have to remove the human factor from the equation, because that complicates everything. Like the reason roads are very complicated is to stop people bashing into things, and to slow down people and make them aware of anything on the road. And once you have a machine that can self-drive, you can get rid of not all of it, but like a lot of those things. And have just Bluetooth tokens or whatever, or QR codes everywhere, or whatever it would be. That would be far simpler. And a camera on a car is not going to miss a sign unless it's been painted over, whereas human is going to miss that sign. You get distracted all the time. We forget that cars are heavy and that they're fast killing machines. Even a little poodly car that you buy for your grandma, it's heavy enough to kill somebody if you're not careful. So and again, a human's going to miss things. The robot's not going to do it. So I think once if that event was sort of to happen, I think that would have been remembered as a sort of transition. But until we sort of, I don't know. The trouble is we can't just tell everybody, look, you can't drive a car from today. People will revolt, and
especially if they're expensive, like you mentioned. A good point.
I think that's the problem, and certainly having a startup that sticks 50 sensors on the car and has 20 computers in a boot, I think that just goes nowhere. That might be a good research for your university, but I think that those companies I think they're wasting money. But that's just my take on it. I'm sure they're learning something along the way, and I'm sure there's something coming out of it, but it's not self-driving technology. Because we don't buy things just because they're complex. We like things that are simple and, for better or worse, cheap or affordable. I should say, because there's a level at which things are too cheap and they're useless. They pretend to do certain jobs, but there's a sweet spot, and I think Tesla's just way too expensive for most people around the world to solve that problem. But they're doing amazing things. So I'm not going to, like, at least in the AI space, I think I think they're certainly leading it. And I don't know. I don't know what else people are going to remember. Maybe if we do something more about removing the I think certainly we're going to remember the fact that there was a dirty period in the world. Industrial Revolution, and the sort of the first couple hundred years, probably, or not a couple hundred years, but the first 100 years were dirty because that's the only thing we could do. I mean, I was watching a documentary, some sort of a travel show the other day, and they were mentioning an island off coast of Africa, whatever it was called, doesn't matter. But they were saying that there was loads of Brits in 1920s, 30s going there for holidays to escape the smoke of the Industrial Revolution. That was like, the posters was just basically saying people, the air is clean here. I mean, if people didn't caught on to that back then, I think that could be something that is well remembered in the future, because we certainly remember tragic things along the way. So if anything worse comes out of the climate change crisis, I think that will be remembered. I mean, there might be no humans in 1,000 years on the planet. The planet's going to be fine, but there might be no humans. In which case, we'll see how that goes. This actually turned very dark all of a sudden. I don't know. I just the longer I live, the more the less appreciation I have for humans being smart, and just everyone just seems to be doing whatever everybody else is doing instead of doing the sort of the things that actually will solve everybody else's problems. And so we need some sort of a revolution. And I think Elon Musk is leading the way when it comes to AI, at least in cars. So I salute him for that. Anyway, do you have anything else you want to say? Because this went very dark all of a sudden, and I just want to cheer up.
That's fine.
So okay, let's just turn this around a little bit, and let's talk about the charging network in the UK. I've already mentioned the fact that you're well known for giving updates about that, and there's a lot of good happening about it. So I'll let you take over.
Yeah, no. So it's there's a lot of investment going in, and I think especially the next year or two will be quite exciting. I mean, if we look at just GridServe, a year ago they hadn't even bought the electric highway. It was Ecotricity, and I avoided all the service stations. And now, I can not confidently actually, I can turn up to most of them, and the biggest worry is normally that they're busy, and someone's charging on there until like 100% or whatever. But so I think in the future we'll see more hubs popping up, and then there's a lot of discussions about consumer experience. So what other things that we can provide to the user so that they just feel more confident. So one of the issues that comes up quite a bit is like when you get to a charger and it says 150 kilowatts and you plug in, and for whatever reason, either the charger or the car, you only get 50 or 40 kilowatts, something like that. So there's a need for more information given to the user. I know that Kempower is starting to be deployed with Osprey, and they have on their devices, it actually tells you what the vehicle is asking for, and again, this is it becomes this like fragmented experience, and it comes down to data, like funnily enough, like the way that the cars talk to the charger, the way that the chargers talk to the back office, the way that different manufacturers develop the CCS implementation, the way that the different charging hardware manufacturers develop the communication between the car and the charger, and then the car and the CPO's back office, which can be different across, different companies. And it's a bit of a mess, and it brings back to the whole idea of like architecture, and you can have all this functionality, but if there's no cohesive like coordination, it can become a mess. And so what I'm interested in is a future where even if we have enough chargers or reliable chargers and all that, just something that can tie everything up and mean that I can, ideally in my car, I can say I want to go to this location, and it automatically pulls in all the data from all the different charge point operators and says, there's 5 of these and they do CCS, which your car supports. Your state of charge is going to be this much when you get there, and let's say the reliability of that site is good. The amount of power it's currently drawing in is also good. So we're going to route you through there, and then you get there. You don't have to. Definitely don't need to pull out your phone and use an app unless you want to. Ideally, you don't need to use a contactless terminal. You just plug and charge. And then that gets billed to whatever you want. But then also, what's important is that charge session, the data that we can pull from that. That it's this particular type of car, what the charge curve should be, and what it could be, and what it isn't, and how that feeds into how reliable a charging a specific charger is. Like that whole connected. That's what I would kind of say is smart, not necessarily intelligent, but smarter. The idea that we can pull in all this different information and provide an experience that offers the best experience possible. But we're nowhere near there. No. I just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, that would be amazing. But there are cars that can do that. Tesla can, within certain parameters, do that with their own superchargers. But it's not perfect. I've driven Tesla enough times to know that sometimes you turn up at the charger and there's 2 stalls, but they're both taken, and the car specifically told me to drive that way.
Okay. Yeah.
And even though there was another site 10 miles up a road with 10 stalls and probably more chances of them being empty, or some of them being available. And then obviously you get slow charging speeds on Teslas as well, especially the older models. Polestar 2, I think, is trying to do
that. Yeah.
But obviously, then you have the other side of it, which is the fact that the chargers are quite dumb. They do have all the data, but they're not showing it to the user. They're not sharing it with anybody. If they're sharing it with the back office, it would be great, like online. But usually they just store the logs and ship them overnight. And certainly the charging point operators, CPOs, they don't want to share that data with anybody else. So there's so many different variables. There's so many different things that would have to fall in place. And cynics would say, we don't need any of that when we're driving petrol cars. Why can't we just get the same thing? To which I would say, this is like horse versus bicycle sort of difference. I don't want to go, because it's pears and apples. Like it's the only thing that these two cars have common with each other is the 4 wheels and a steering wheel. The rest of it is completely different experience. And we certainly will never get cars that charge in 5 minutes because unless physics changes. But that's just my
and I think the other point is that you're comparing technology that's maybe 5-10 years in its maturity, and not just technology, the infrastructure as well, with something that's being built up over 100 years. I'm sure in the early days of a petrol car, people did have these kinds of concerns, like, what if I want to fill up and then buy something from the shop? Do I have to go to a separate location? Or what if there's multiple types of fuel and all of that kind of stuff? So
I mean, it wasn't until about 50s in America that people started driving cars, or regular earthlings could, or just common people could actually afford a car. Before that, everyone was walking, using public transport. Certainly the railway networks in the world were much more prevalent and popular, and then car kind of started replacing it in 60s. So things used to be completely different, and the first cars were electric at the beginning because that was actually easier to deliver back then. Do you know how people used to buy, quote unquote, or fill up back in the day?
With the fuel or with the
with petrol.
Okay.
Do you know how they used to obtain petrol?
Was it like they burned the coal in their house or something like that? Or
no, petrol used to be available in pharmacies.
Oh, okay.
So you just you bought it in little jugs, or little bottles, and that's how much petrol you would have. So and those were the cars that were like hundreds of thousands of pounds in today's money, and they burned fast, and they were So nobody cared back then. And obviously, that if you compare this to the transition that we're having now, we're leaps and bounds
ahead.
Exactly.
And I do think similarly, even in 10, 20 years, the way that the technology will evolve either on the car side or on the charger side, it's not going to be something we think about. So either we'll have more home charging and longer range battery cars, though I'm not a fan of those, or the charging will be a bit quicker, and we don't need to know if a charger is available, but because the chances are there are enough of them, and they're reliable and they charge quick enough that by the time you get there, you might have to wait for a few minutes or whatever. Or it could just be wireless charging or whatever it could be in 50 years time. So rightfully, I don't think it's a inherent thing about electric cars as a concept that means it's inconvenient or anything like that. But people see that because they're just. I actually think they're more convenient. I don't like driving to a petrol station. Like, even if I go to a service station, if I want to go and eat something in one of the shops, I have to do that first, and then I have to go to the petrol station, and then I have to actually hold it and fill it up, and then I have to pay a lot. So, but just going on to the point of, a lot of pieces have to fall in to get this kind of dream experience. I'm aware that the government OZEV are looking into data and the challenges around that, and hopefully they will they're exploring the idea of having kind of enforcing some of this stuff to do with data sharing and stuff. So that's
I think that there's going to have to be loads of sort of enforcement and regulation for people to talk to each other, because at the moment it's just Wild West, and that, sadly never works.
And even how you measure the data can differ. So, what do you count as a successful charge? Is it being able to start the charge? Is it a certain amount of power delivered? Or is it a certain rate achieved? Like all these things. I'm sure you've done the same as well. There's definitely been times when I've been on the ChargePoint Operators app and it's saying that a unit is available. And then I go there and on the screen it says out of order. Yeah. And it's like, what kind of metric or communication are they using to determine? Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, they're all talking. We're talking about intelligence and or even smartness. And if two devices can't talk to each other and actually successfully exchange a piece of information about what the status is, that's not very smart.
No.
Yeah. That's very interesting. I mean, I'm sure we could have gone for much longer, but I'm conscious of your time.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. No, it's been a real pleasure. I did want to mention some of the work I'm doing with the Electric Vehicle Association England, for it, if that's okay. Yeah. So, as some of your listeners, well, hopefully a lot of your listeners will be aware that Electric Vehicle Association England is a community interest company. And it was set up to try and provide EV drivers a voice, particularly when it comes to deciding on different government policies, working with different industry members. And I think that up until now, it's been really hard to get traction with some of these ideas that we all have, these experiences that we have. And so I came across EVA England like when they were setting up, and I've been volunteering with them since September, and I do feel like there is a lot of potential there to really push for some of these things. And I feel like it's important for a diverse set of voices to be at the table. And if, as the EV drivers, we're not represented well enough, we kind of end up getting an experience that's very much designed by CPOs or OEMs and stuff like that. So the fact that there is this in England and there is, a similar body in Scotland and Northern Ireland, I think it's a positive thing. And I just wanted to use this opportunity to just mention it and have a look at the website, evaengland.org.uk.
Right. Yeah. And I'm sure there's going to be more about it in the future episodes of this podcast.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't disclose my future plans, but Right. Thank you, Maz.
Thank you, man. It's been a real big pleasure, and it's always great to talk to you. And I'm honored that you would think I'm worthy enough for the podcast. But thank you. Yeah.
I mean, you're an institution when it comes to the community, so I'm sure I would get protested if I didn't feature you at some point. So, thanks.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Well, that's it for the show. Thank you, Maz, for appearing and giving us a bit of your time. I hope you've all enjoyed it. If you're listening up to this point, you're awesome. Don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, star this show, give us a review, and all that good stuff. Subscribe everyone in your family. I need more subscribers. Anyway, March might be a bit more quiet month for episodes, so thank you for listening, and